All right, so why don't we get started? My name's Greg Lipper, and we have Rafa here and Daniel. They're going to introduce themselves, and we hope to have an exciting, riveting, dynamic discussion. And we're hoping to get some questions and comments from those attending. So definitely don't be shy to enter your questions into the chat, and I'll hope to make sure we get through them. So I'll start by introducing myself. Greg Lipper. I have a consultant called Lipper Solutions, and I am based in Boston, in Massachusetts. I'm originally from Canada, and I've been working in and with organizations on the global business services landscape for the better part of 20 years, with firms such as Fidelity, Staples, and NASDAQ. I got Staples shared service center, IT center set up in Gdansk, Tri-City in Poland for them. I also helped to dramatically grow NASDAQ's site in Vilnius, Lithuania, which is now a very, very large, thriving site and doing very well. And I have some significant experience in other parts of the world, most notably India and Philippines. And my specialty is around improving productivity and service quality among global teams. And I have a proprietary app called SmartWorks, which is soon going live in production to help firms measure employee productivity. And I'll turn it over, Rafa, to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Greg. Rafael Lopez-Espinosa. I'm the head of strategy and the head of the Warsaw office for Point72. We're a decently sized hedge fund, very active, with about $18 billion on assets under management, and we basically trade every security at any time of the day. Before Point72, where I spent 6 years, I was a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. And the reason I'm in this panel is because we just opened this new office in Warsaw, and we've been on the ground for 5 months and very excited about sharing our experience so far.
Terrific. That's great. And then Daniel, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Daniel, you're on mute. I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Maybe one of our organizers can help us unmute Daniel.
How can I help you? What's going on?
Yeah, so Daniel is muted. He's having trouble getting off mute.
Okay, there's this like 4 icons under the screen, and the last one, can you click it? Yeah, so you can now see the like manage file or anything for sharing your audio and video, because we can hear you like we could hear you before. So I'm not really sure what's going on. Maybe refresh your site and join again. It will
Daniel,
it will resolve the problem.
You could log out and log back in.
Okay,
so,
I hope I helped. Good luck.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So while we're waiting for Daniel to resume, let's get going, and Daniel will come back to us. So I actually wanted to start, Rafa, with your experience, because you have real live hands-on experience on the ground today, and is one of the speakers earlier today pointed out. Oh, Daniel's back. Daniel, can we test your audio?
I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, good. Now we can hear you now. Yes, perfect. We can hear you now. Daniel, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Daniel. I'm from Romania, the second largest city from my country. The name is Iasi. I am the head of economic department in Iasi City Hall. I'm teaching at the university about business and about economy. And in the same time, because Greg is from Boston, I have to tell him that I spent 6 years in Massachusetts. Is my second home right there on Martha's Vineyard. So I'm happy to be here with you guys and talk about economy and business and about the future.
Oh, terrific. Well, that's wonderful. I did not know that. So I'll have to welcome you back to Massachusetts at one point. And Rafael also spent some time in Boston. So we all have a connection there. So we're going to start with Rafael. I'd love to hear, since you're on the ground now, you're heading up the Poland site and the strategy for a very important hedge fund run by a very famous guy. You guys are hiring a lot of people right now. And so I think actually you have really interesting information to share with us, and we all want to hear a couple of things because as I was saying before, one of the speakers this morning said something very interesting. He said, you know, facts on the ground change every 6 to 8 months around here. So what was true a year ago, 2 years ago isn't necessarily true next. And of course, this year, things are changing by the week, given the all the change we have going on and disruption between COVID and the U.S. election and how that's impacting, which the prior panel spoke about. So would love to hear from you right now. And I know you're in Warsaw. As you're hiring and building a team in Warsaw, I think the key questions we want to hear is, what's it like in general for you recruiting in Warsaw? And in what way are you finding COVID is, if at all, is impacting your recruiting efforts?
Thank you, Greg. It's very exciting times for us. We are hiring a lot of people. We have a target to get to 150 people by the end of next year. We already hired about 50 or 60 people in the last 4 months. And we knew before coming that talent was here and talent was really good. And being on the ground has confirmed that research. The people we are meeting are really very impressive. For us, given COVID, it has created an opportunity and a challenge at the same time. The opportunity, especially a few months ago, is to take advantage of some dislocations in the market. Some other players in the market were not investing or even like ramped down operations, and that allow us to access to some available talent that wouldn't have been available in different times. The challenge is operational. I mean, we cannot do like the typical interview cycle with people coming to the office and shaking hands, having the personal connection. But I think we're adjusting and we're doing a very good job by doing WebEx and video conference. And, you know, we miss a little bit the personal touch, but the video conference is not a bad substitute. The part that we are not great right now is on the onboarding process. That's creating a little bit of complexity, because there is still a lot of paperwork that needs to be done in person and wet signatures and computers that have to change hands. So that's creating a little bit of an operational hurdle, but it's like relatively small in the big scheme of things. So I would say that despite of COVID, we're still able to hire at a very, very good pace.
And what about ramping up your new hires? So once you get them on the floor, in our complex world of financial services, new hires often learn on the job, what we affectionately call OJT, on the job training. So are you finding that that's a challenge when folks are remote and you can't get everybody, or you're finding it works okay on video conference?
It's okay. It's not our first choice would have been like to either fly people to the US to do some, you know, on the job training, or even people from the US there and actually spend a few months, and also creates better connectivity between the offices. That's something that we cannot do right now because of the situation. So what we are doing is we're asking our people in Poland to work US hours and actually be on video conference. So they're doing basically the late shift right now. They're starting about like 2, 3, 4, and they're staying working from home, connected to the WebEx until the market closes in the US. So that's the way we're like coping with this for now. Hopefully at some point next year, we can like resume like the flying back and forth and we can change this, but this is the adjustment we are making.
Okay, got it. So now I'd love to shift gears to Daniel, and I have the question here is, you know, when I advise organizations about where to globalize, and we talk about Central and Eastern Europe, I sell, especially American companies, I tell them, you know, if you go to Central and Eastern Europe, one of the benefits you have is you have a very exuberant, passionate, excited, ambitious young workforce in these countries and in these cities. That really are excited to work with an American or for an American company, but also, if they can, they want to stay in their hometown, in their home locations where they have their family, they have their friends, and they can build a family. So you sort of get the best of both worlds when you go to places in Central and Eastern Europe where you can get talent that's very excited, very educated, and at the same time, you know, you get the benefits of them being able to work out of their home location. What I'm wondering, Daniel, since you're you know, you're associated, you have students and you're teaching, you're in the business community, you're in the academic community. I guess the question for you, and I know you're in Romania, so let's, you know, start with there. Are you seeing that trend continue? So is that sort of what I've seen over the years? Is that getting stronger? Is that getting weaker? And or is that I have a follow-up, but let me start with that. Is that trend that I just described, or that feature, that benefit of coming here, do you see that as still a strong factor in this location?
Okay, so mostly I want to say that all my students, if in the past years all of them they decided to emigrate, right now the trend is changed. Most of them they decided to stay here and try to build something, because meantime Iași, the city of Iași, became the most important academic, economic, and I can say cultural center from the northeast region of Romania, and his position at the east border of Romania make him the most important for businesses also. The population of Iași is 500,000 people, and the county area is almost 1 million. So we have university here. Universities, we have over 50,000 students, and I'm happy to see that year after year they decide to try to do something in this city. In the same time, I think I have some proofs. Because other companies are coming here and try to steal them from making them their employees, and in this way I have a big example is Amazon. I think all of us we know about Amazon. They have, I think, 2,000 employees here in Iași. All of them are really young. And in the same time, not only Amazon, we have Lear Corporation, we have Delphi who are here. So many American companies who give them big salaries, you know, more money, and City Hall is trying only to create the area for them to make them feel safe, to have a health system, and you know, to show them that they are connected to problems.
Okay, interesting. Right. So, so one interesting, you know, interesting thing about our panel is Rafael is representing the tier one, the top of the tier one cities, right? So Warsaw, Budapest, Bucharest. These are big capital cities that are everybody knows and that have a lot of brand name firms and big populations. Daniel, you're representing really a tier two city. And, you know, ever since I've been in the business for 20 something years, there's been all this discussion, debate about tier one versus tier two. Even in India, they even talk about tier three cities. So I'm wondering, you know, we could get a couple of different perspectives, you know, so we'll start with Rafael. So what attracted you guys to go to a tier one city like Warsaw?
For us, it's all about talent, Greg, and it's about attracting the best and the brightest we can. And for us, it's important to have a large economy and a large population of people, and also that the city is a magnet for talent. So one of the key decision factors for Warsaw is that Warsaw is acting really like a magnet on this region. You have people from the Ukraine or other cities in Poland that come to Warsaw either to study or to work, and that was very important for us.
Right. And then Daniel, what do you think is the big benefit for cities such as yours? What would be the big attraction for companies to choose a tier 2 city such as yours, which is still a sizable city, as you mentioned, 500,000 population and almost 1 million in the metro, in the greater area. Certainly not a small city.
I think it's education and the medical center, but education is the first reason that someone should choose our city. Over 50,000 students, and most of them, all of them are really good. And beside that, I think even the relation between the investors and the public administration, it should represent a really important asset when someone is deciding to open a business in a city like that. And I think that Iasi city whole is changing in this way. So it's really friendly. Is a business-friendly city, and in the same time we have the level of taxation is normal, you know. So and most we are trying to bring people, investors here, and give them all they need to come here and realize that it's a perfect place to start a business because we have all the conditions. Yeah, so education and the relation between investors and public administration, I would say that are two important things.
Right. Well, you know, I have a hypothesis here that I can try out on both of you. Is I think with COVID, so I've written a few articles about this, that one of the things that COVID has done is it sort of has shattered this perception among many managers that really the only way or the best way to run an office, a business operation, is when folks are co-located inside an office, right? When you get the mass, and there's clearly benefits for having people together in an office, which are pretty obvious. But some managers felt it was a necessity or a very close to a must-have, if not a must-have. And we've seen in COVID that where we haven't had a choice, we've actually broken that paradigm. You know, I work with call centers, and I was speaking with someone recently at one of the large call centers in Philippines, and that call center, their ethos of their leadership was, we need our people inside a building, partly for security reasons. They said, we want to monitor what they're doing and make sure it's security. Well, you know, and they were a third-party vendor to a lot of important companies. Well, obviously COVID came, they had no choice, and they figured it out. They figured out the security piece, they figured out the training piece, they made it work. So one hypothesis I have, or prediction, is it will be easier for companies to make the jump to tier 2 cities because they don't necessarily have to worry about all the physical infrastructure and geographic concerns that they had when they made the decision to go to tier 1. I think tier 1 cities will always be popular for all kinds of reasons. You know, one of the reasons is, you know, you've moved your family over there, and you know, there's some attraction. You've got kids in school, and there's going to be some attraction to get someone like you over there to go to a city like Warsaw. I did an expat assignment for 2 years in India. I brought my family to Bangalore. I don't know that I would have brought my family to a tier 2 or a tier 3 city in Bangalore. So there's also benefits from that standpoint. But as we get more virtual, more remote, then, you know, I could certainly envision a hub and spoke strategy, especially for larger firms, where they may have a hub in a place like Warsaw, Budapest, Bucharest, for their Eastern Europe or entire EMEA operations, and then have spokes in places like where you are, Daniel, in tier 2 cities, where they can have people working from home, they can have small offices, and with the help of agencies, recruiting agencies, they may have access to talent in multiple places. So that's sort of a going theory I have. I'm just wondering how you guys would react to that. Daniel, maybe we'll hear from you first on that.
We just talked today with the ambassador about the remote work, and we realized that the only connection that our city is having with the others is the airport, and at this point the airport is shut down. I mean, nothing big is happening right over there. So we spoke about the internet connection. How is it? If it's fast enough? If we try to help the companies who are experiencing problem with this, and because I have a connection with most with all the companies from the IT and CE industry. I realized the last meeting with them, they didn't say anything about this. They say that it's even better with working from home. The only thing is that the employees are not so happy, you know, because the social distancing, the social distance is obvious, and they are experiencing they have some employees who decide to quit their job and try to do something else because they can't work only from home.
Right.
I don't know
Makes sense.
if I was on your...
Okay, Rafael?
Yeah, commenting on that, Greg, I think you have a very good point. The thing is, like, right now we are remote, and we have been remote for a while, but at least ourselves are seeing some fatigue of like people being fully remote and never in the office. So I think once things get better, there will be a hybrid model of being in the office and being remote. But the office, I think, is going to be there for most of us, because, you know, there are a lot of advantages of like having these encounters in the coffee machine and so on, right? So I think you're probably right on this hub and spoke model, with like people spending some time in tier twos in the smaller offices, but spending also some days in like the main hub in the top tier cities. I think that can be one of the constructs of the future.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So now you guys have touched on a very important point, which is employee engagement during this period. So again, one of the things I tell organizations who are looking to go abroad and build global teams in places like Eastern Europe is, you know, I say if you're an American company coming in, if you're Amazon or you're Google, especially the young people in tech, they all know you. They know you really well. But even big brand names back in US aren't necessarily well known. So when I was advising Staples, for example, Staples was not a well-known brand name in Poland. In fact, most of the young people knew Staples who were into basketball. They knew it from the Staples Center in LA and the LA Lakers, and that was their association. But they didn't really know Staples the way they know it in the US. So we had to do a lot of work on getting associates excited and engaged around our culture, our organization, our values, why they want to be with us, why they want to stay with us, the benefits of having a career with us. Because obviously, if you know, it's one thing to hire people. Rafael, you'll see this as you're there longer, right? But attracting, and not just attracting people, retaining people for the long term. You want to have people who are going to stay for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, right? And really build careers with you. You want to have a core group that stays and grows their careers. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, you know, and it's a particular dynamic when you have an American company going over to Eastern Europe, where, again, even though we know Stephen Cohen's name very well, I bet a lot of your employees, new employees, Rafael, may not have even heard of him, certainly may not have heard of Point72. And so now you're dealing with how to get them into the culture, into the groove, right, of your company, when you can't bring, you know, you would bring some managers over from US to sit with them, and they get together, they go out for beers, and they build those bonds. So I'm wondering, in your early days, how are you finding that going? Have you come up with any sort of tricks of how to sort of replicate that when you can't have everybody huddled together in the office the way you would in normal times?
So it's a very good question. We're doing a couple of things. We are over communicating. We have chats open. We use Symphony in our company. Basically, we have like all these like full office or team chats. We are always like continuously communicating over there, so people feel connected.
Yeah.
And then doing a lot of virtual events. Like we don't do dailies, but we do at least a weekly office meeting when we all come in a Zoom and we see each other and we share something, and trying to have a lot of those, because in these times it's much better to spend the time with like over communicating versus leaving people alone. Something that is a big advantage of Eastern Europe and Warsaw specifically is the time difference with our headquarters. I mean, we have a very, very nice overlap of time. You know, I think we can get like 5 to 6 hours really over time without like getting too much into the personal life of anybody. So that helps for the connectivity, because to your point, something in the COVID world, I mean, it's difficult to know where people are. And, you know, I have guys sitting or girls sitting in Connecticut, and I have guys sitting in, you know, Ursinov, Warsaw. And it's because they're telling you that they're there, but if not, you couldn't realize where
You wouldn't know. Yeah. Yeah, we're all in different locations, but unless we told you, you wouldn't even know. No, that's a very good point. So I wanted to ask about shifts, and so that's a good segue since you brought it up. I'll ask both of you. So here's my question. So when I talk about the benefits of Eastern Europe, Central Europe for American companies, I do talk about the overlap, that there's an overlap of several hours, but I also mentioned to them that there's a reluctance for most employees in Central and Eastern Europe. There's a general reluctance to work a full US shift. I found that once you get to about 8 o'clock in the evening, local time in Europe, people really want to get home to their families. I think the tradition of having their meal together, dinner together with the family is very ingrained. And where you try to have people work a full US shift, the attrition rates tend to be quite high, especially and very difficult to attract in the IT. Almost very, very difficult to attract IT talent who's going to work that. Versus in India and certainly in Philippines, and then you can go obviously to Mexico, where it's the same time zone. So you can go to other locations to get that. So what I'm wondering again from both of you is, number one, really two questions. So what I've observed, are you seeing that, it's a two-part question, so I'll start with part one. Are you seeing that trend change at all, or is that still what you're finding in terms of people really being very happy to work that mid shift, but up until about 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, and then harder to get people to work into the late hours Europe time?
Look, I don't have a long experience here, but what I'm seeing is totally aligned with what you are mentioning. I think people are open to work US hours for a short period of time, in our case for the training, as long as it's, hey, it's your first 2 months, you're going to do this. And they're okay with that. I don't think they're okay with doing like forever, but they're flexible with starting a little bit later and leaving a little bit later. That still gives, it's not the full US hours, and for us, like the market closes at 10 p.m. local time in Warsaw, but gets you almost there. To your point, I mean, if you can get somebody to work from 10 to 6 or 11 to 7, it's a pretty decent overlap time, because at least in our business, we start very early in the US. It's not uncommon to have people in the office at 6 a.m. in the morning. That is noon in Warsaw. So we have a very, very nice overlap, over 6 hours overtime overlap over there. Yeah,
that makes sense. Daniel, how would you comment on that?
Greg, when you have 50,000 students graduating every year, I'm sure that you're going to find at least 5,000 who they're going to accept to work from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Actually, we have 2 American companies here. One of them is Hart Hanks, IT&C sector, of course. I have friends, they are starting at 4 p.m. And they are finishing at 12 in the midnight. So, and no one is complaining. Actually, for someone who is really young, it's even better because they can sleep more in the morning, you know. So they are happy, yeah.
Yeah, my son would like those hours. Yeah.
No, I was going to mention that to that point. I'm seeing people mostly early in their careers, younger people, that they like that, you know, they sleep a little bit more, go to the gym in the morning, walk the dog, grab some lunch, and then go to the office. And then later, when they're done, I mean, now it's difficult because everything is closed, but you can hit the bar for a light dinner and have some beers with the friends after
Yeah.
the work.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad life for, you know, in your first 5 years of your career.
Well, you know, I think that so I have a couple thoughts on that. Is that I think what Daniel said is very interesting. That I think, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he's saying that in a smaller city. I think when you get to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, when there's less competition for talent, you don't have as many big brand names competing for talent. You're going to get more maybe people who, especially younger people, who are prepared to work those hours. So that could be another competitive advantage to going to a tier 2 city, a smaller city. I would also think that if you know, we have these invest in ... right? We have invest in Lithuania. We heard from them earlier. If one of the locations, if one of the cities or even countries figures out a way to make that sort of a thing the way they have in Manila. You know, Manila doesn't sleep 24/7. The BPO industry is so strong there that 2 in the morning looks like 2 in the afternoon there. There's traffic and bars are open and restaurants and it goes nonstop. But if there's a location in Central Eastern Europe that ever figures out that make that a cultural thing that's popular, that could be another competitive advantage to draw companies in. So that and then the third maybe prediction or hypothesis, I don't know, prediction necessarily, hypothesis, as we move more to this hybrid models and remote working, it may be easier for companies to find individual associates. Like Daniel said, there's 50,000, you know, graduates, you know, even if 10% are willing to work late hours, that's 5,000 people. So then you can pick and choose your people from different locations, since they're not all necessarily having to come into the office every day. You may be able to get that. So it's an interesting dynamic, because that is one of the factors that companies look at when they're trying to set up operations in outside of their headquarter location. They're looking at time zones very carefully and work shifts. So that's a really interesting
point, Greg. I think working from home or remotely helps with people taking these like weird shifts, because one of the issues is to drive to go to the office in the middle of the night or in weird times. I mean, if you are able to work from home, I mean, you just set up the alarm and you get adjusted, and you know, it's not as traumatic if you want to have to work those hours. If you are, I mean, personally, when I travel to the US these days, I have to keep my, you know, my Warsaw schedule. I wake up like extremely early, but as I'm working from home, it's not that terrible. It's just like I'm adjusting and I go to bed like super early, but it's not like so traumatic as if you had like to be calling an Uber or trying to take like public transportation in the middle of the night that is closed. That's the part that may be a problem.
Absolutely. And I know there's been a safety concern for people having to commute in the middle of the night, late hours, especially women traveling alone. And so you don't have that safety issue as well. So I wanted to shift to another question for you guys. Before I do, I just want to mention to those who are on listening and watching us, if you have any questions for any of the three of us, please type your question into the chat. And we'd love to get to some questions as we talk through this. So so the next one is really around a question I have is certainly up until recently, a lot of young people coming out of graduate programs, universities, very attracted to brand name companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook. Also attracted to US, to working for US companies, partly with the potential to maybe be able to go and spend some time in the US as part of their training, be able to get a free trip to New York or you know, San Francisco is fun. and just the excitement of being part of an American company. The perception of America in the world has certainly been evolving since 2017. And I'm just wondering, in the last few years, given that, has that impacted at all young people's in Central and Eastern Europe, their perceptions of working for U.S. companies, or does it not impact at all? Daniel, I'll start with you, since you're working with students there, and then see what Rafael has to say as he's hiring young people in Warsaw.
Yeah, the impact is obvious, because USA is having this program, the program Work and Travel, and all the young people are experiencing this program. At least one from 3 students from my city is going to visit USA in the summer and to work and travel. They are spending the money right over there. They are coming home without anything in the first year. In the second year, they are realizing that they can do some money. They are doing some money second year, and most of them, they are trying to, not to steal ideas, but to learn and come back and, try to open their own business, which is good for our city and for the entire country. In the same time, I think that the traveling abroad is a really good thing for the Romanians in general, because we've been under communism so long, and in some cities we still feel the communism ideas to the oldest people, not the youngest, the younger ones. Yeah, and I want to tell you something that I forgot. This city, Iași, is the youngest city from my country. The average is 37 years is the average of our population, which can be another big point for this area, for the entire area, actually. So yeah, I agree with the traveling. I agree with the work and travel. I agree with learning a lot abroad and come back home and try to do something with what you learned in the USA or in another country.
Okay, so you're saying that U.S. is as popular as ever, and young people are still very much attracted to working for a U.S. company, with your experience. Okay, great. Rafael, what are you seeing on the ground in Warsaw today?
They seem very US. I mean, they like US companies. I mean, I don't know if it's more or less than before, but compared to other corners of the world, where I spent some time in South America, for instance, or in other areas of Europe, where it's not that popular to be in a US company. Here, it feels like it's popular, and people like to be. Actually, they say, "I want to work in an American company." So it's a stark contrast versus other areas in Western Europe or South America.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's still a cachet. It's really, again, it's one of the ways to attract talent, right? When you're interviewing, I'm sure you know this, Rafael, is, it's a resume builder for them. So, you want them to spend their whole career with you, but even if they spend 5 years and then they go on to do something else, having worked for Stephen Cohen's 0.72 $18 billion hedge fund, that's a big deal. Versus a local firm. So it's a big resume builder. I think it's going to continue to be. It's a big reason that you can attract really great talent when you're hiring over there.
And to your point, since they like the culture of American firms, I mean, I get a lot of feedback that people are smiling a lot, are very casual, are very open. It's more like, "Hey, bud, how are you doing?" versus calling people like Mr. and Mrs. that other corporate cultures, maybe in other companies, have that. So I think that at least the people we are hiring, that is mostly a demographic of more of a younger, tech-centric, technology-focused people. They really like this kind of American culture.
Right. So what would you say would be any of the impediments to growth of American companies going to Central Eastern Europe? What might be the biggest, if there's anything that's you know, an impediment or an obstacle or any kind of thing that might slow down that, what might it be? What's the biggest challenge you might find as you're growing to your 150 people?
Well, I think the problem is the biggest challenge will be the size of the talent pool, the amount of competition, right? And it doesn't get lost on us that, you know, salaries are increasing here, and there is a very nice arbitrage right now, big discount between New York salaries and Eastern Europe salaries. But that's not. I don't think that will last forever. I mean, at some point that, you know, as salary inflation creeps, we're going to see less and less of that. So it's a little bit about the competition and the availability of talent. I mean, the more people like me are coming, I mean, it's great, but at some point there is no more. I mean, I think I was looking at numbers in Poland. I mean, unemployment is close to zero or like very, very low in tech roles. There is virtually not unemployment. They're importing people from Ukraine and other areas because they cannot cope with that. I mean, at some point there's going to be too much demand for talent and not that much supply. And that will be, for me, that's like one of the biggest worries.
So Daniel and Ish, are you finding the same thing? Is unemployment in the tech sector close to zero?
Yes, but I want to come to your previous question to add something.
Yeah.
If you allow me.
Yeah.
In Iași, Amazon is having 1,700 employees. I have an information that almost 500 of them, they experienced the work and travel program in the USA at least one summer. So from 1,700 people, 500 of them, they've been in the United States, which means that the visit right there help Amazon from here, because the culture is experienced already by the Romanians, and they know how to deal with the work flow, and in the same time is helping our young people because they've been right in the United States, and it was easy for them to adapt right here. In the same time, I will add something. Rafael said something, but I want to say that the bad thing that is keep talking about Romania is the corruption, and the companies are, are becoming really vigilant to come here and open a business, which in the last years, I think it's a legend. The corruption in Romania, it's not bigger than in any other country from Europe. I think we did big steps in this way, and at least in this part of our country, the corruption is at a low level.
Yeah, it's I think that's where business services is a big advantage, right? So if you're trying to set up a factory, I always said this when I was living and working in India, and goes back about 12 years. And India also is known for corruption. I always said, if you're American, or a European company going to India and you want to set up a factory, you have to deal with bureaucracy, you have to deal with corruption, you have to just deal with inefficiency, right? To get your actual product from the factory all the way to the shipyard and onto a ship and through customs. I mean, there's a lot of it's very complicated, very difficult, and you have to deal with all the local nuances of bureaucracy and corruption. But when you're a tech services center, you don't have to deal with any of that, because all the value of your product is going through the wire, right? It's going through the fiber optic cable. And so really it's you're able to protect yourself from that. You're sort of bubble yourself from that. So I was with Fidelity. We had a big center of 5,000 people in Bangalore, and sure, there's corruption in Bangalore, but we were really inured to it because we had our center, and everything we were trading back and forth was information, was data. So I agree with you. I think that the corruption and bureaucracy and challenges are bigger when you're dealing with tangible products. I think I think for companies like Point 72 going to a place like Warsaw, I don't, and if I think if he was coming to your city, I don't think he would find that was an impediment. I would agree with you on that. So we have about just little less than 10 minutes. So we'll see if there's any questions. But in the meantime, I wanted to see if Daniel or Rafael, if you guys had any additional points you wanted to make that we hadn't covered. So I'll start first with Daniel and then see if Rafael has any points. I'll have some final points to make, and then we'll see if there's any questions before we wrap up. So Daniel, did you have any other points you wanted to share with us?
I don't know. I want to conclude somehow that our city lately made some major steps for in the public administration sector modernization. We have a lot of we attract a lot of money with the European funds, and I think everything is changing in our city. In the comment area, my colleague Dan Zaharia, who is a really friendly guy of our city, put a video of our city, a presentation. I will be happy if everyone will watch that video. It's having English translation, so it's easy for everyone to to be here for 5 minutes and realize that it's a good spot to come and see, to take connect with the public administration and take a decision after if you are interested to come and invest here and or to visit our city. Because in the same time, besides business, I think we have a really big potential for being up with the tourists here.
Okay, great. Now that's very helpful, and I think it's good for us to learn. I know I like to learn about the different locations that are out there, and admittedly, I didn't really know much about Yash, so it's very helpful for me to hear that. I'll certainly watch the video, and I'm a big believer in exploring tier 2 cities more. That companies should explore them. So it's good that you've been able to shed some light into what's going on there. Rafael, did you have any things you wanted to share before I give some? I'll share. I have some additional points I'll share afterwards.
Yeah, some quick thought that we ran a project to decide what is the best location for us to expand, and we look at different regions of the world, and we landed in Eastern Europe as the most promising, and then we went country by country. And it's true that we found very attractive places like Romania, Hungary, and then we ended up in Warsaw, but it was a close call. And so far, our experience has been very, very positive. I mean, we couldn't be more pleased with the quality of the talent we are discovering and how welcoming the city is. And even if it's like tough times with COVID and things and coming to the winter and so on, it's still like a very positive experience, and I think that we have made a very good decision. So far we are big fans of being in Warsaw and of the region.
Yeah, that's great. And I found, as I mentioned in the introductory comments, I set up a center in Gdansk, an IT center, and then I grew a center in Vilnius. It was both IT and operations, and I have been, is just like you, I've been extremely pleased with the talent, the caliber of people. We've managed to have high retention rates in both those locations, really great talent, and those exceeded our expectations. And it was much easier, frankly, to do than when I set up operations in India or Philippines. India was the hardest, I'd say, for setting up. I'll just go back to one thing, and again, if there's any other questions, you guys can type them into the chat. I just wrap with one thought about labor arbitrage and talent pool that you mentioned, Rafael, is the work that I've done in advising companies. There are ways to mitigate that. So what I would say is, and I'm happy to get with you afterwards. We could talk later. But having a multi-year strategy around your growth plans and then looking at your talent pool in a pretty sophisticated way, there are several levers that companies can take to keep the labor arbitrage pretty steady, even in a case where there is wage inflation. So wage inflation is one of the, when I look at a company, I did it similar to you, Rafael. I looked at, for Staples, we looked at 17 different locations across Central and Eastern Europe. And wage inflation was one of the factors I looked at, and not just wage inflation, but projected wage inflation right down the road. So it's certainly a factor, but even when there's wage inflation, and certainly Warsaw is going to have more wage inflation, let's say, than in some other locations. There are ways to buttress against that. There are strategies that to deploy to make sure that your labor arbitrage isn't being fully eroded. But it does require some careful planning. It does require sort of a whole HR plan. And I actually think that again, what I said earlier, this sort of breakthrough thinking around remote work, and you said it, Rafael, you said we're probably going to be in virtual, hybrid models, right? So not virtual, hybrid. So we're probably going to end up not 100% in the office, not 100% at home, but a little bit of a mix. But that also, I think, is going to provide some creative outlets for companies to figure out how to crack the code on the labor arbitrage, because I think that's a real thing. Because if labor arbitrage keeps shrinking, the problem is it means costs are going up, and the CFO is, what they're looking, it's what have you done for me lately, right? So you could have said to them, I think Fidelity, I think we calculated once, we probably, hundreds of millions of dollars were saved when we built the India site. But then it doesn't matter. What matters, it's great, but then for next year, it matters. Costs are going up on your baseline. You're going to have problems with the CFO and meeting budget. So it is a real thing that I think companies need to work on. There are strategies that we could spend a whole hour just talking about that, so we don't have the time here. Certainly, if folks wanted to get in touch with me to hear more about that, you can reach me at lippersolutions.com. I'll put it in here so people can see. And I just wanted to say as we close that this has been a lot of fun. It's actually great to hear from the two different perspectives. I think Rafael is on the ground in a big bustling city that we all know, hiring people. So you're in the middle of the action, and it's great to hear that. Daniel, you're offering a perspective that not everyone gets to see, that you've got a place like Iași, which is, I mean, that's a big city. Your population is about the size of Vilnius, right? So you have a thriving population. You've got a young population, very educated, and there's no reason not to be looking at cities like Iași as companies look to diversify and expand their access to talent. I will close off to say that at the end of the day, Eastern Central Europe is really going to be all about talent in the tech sector. Operations BPO would be a little different, but I think in tech, when we're talking tech services, it's really about talent. There's a talent shortage in tech that's gone on now for at least 10 years, and it's going to continue to be a shortage. And I think that bodes well for CEE. So I'm bullish on the whole region, because the demand for tech is there, and as long as you guys keep turning out those graduates from those engineering schools with those skills, I think we're going to have continue to see folks like Rafael in places like Warsaw and Iași growing growing and hiring. So thank you very much, guys. This was really a lot of fun. It was great to spend time with you. I think we are at the time. We were supposed to stop right now. So I'm happy. I don't know if we're supposed to stay on for a few minutes in case anyone wanted to talk to us, but I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes. But I think they're probably closing down if Anna or somebody else wants to give us the direction. But I think we're gonna wrap up now. And thank you everyone for your time.
Hey, thank you so much, Greg. Great job moderating this. That was fantastic. A lot of fun. Thank you.
A lot of fun. Great.
In Boston one day.
One day in Boston or one day in Romania. By the way, my brother lived in Bucharest for a year. So I never got to Romania.
Oh,
He had a good time there.
let's bring people here in Iasi.
No,
See
it
you.
looks like a good place. All right. Take care.